Give everyone a moment to log on here. Good evening, good evening. Get that connection. We'll see that participant number go up as everyone gets their links connected. You are all in for such a treat this evening. Thank you for joining us. And I don't know about where everybody else is. It's officially a fall evening here in the Chicago area. A little bit brisk overnight, but a little bit warm in the day. It's that lovely Chicago. It's winter in the morning and spring by noon, summer by about 2 o'clock. And then by evening, we get to fall. So that's how we kind of run it around here. Well, I know there may be some others joining us bit by bit, but in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening officially. My name is Ginny Worley-Hemmeter. I am with Anderson's Bookshops, and we'd just like to take a moment to say thank you for joining us this evening to talk about the exciting new book, State of Terror. For those of you who are not near us or not familiar with us, Anderson's Bookshop is an independent bookstore outside of Chicago. We have 2 locations in the suburbs. We have been owned and run by the Anderson family for going on 6 generations now, which, as we have sort of recently discovered, makes us the oldest single family run bookseller in the country. So we're very excited about that and proud of that. But of course, that can't happen without support from our customers and readers and amazing authors like those that are joining us this evening. So we just like to take a moment to say thank you for that. COVID has obviously hit everyone in a very difficult way, but joining us this way, even virtually, shows us that there is light at the end of that tunnel, and we appreciate you for being a part of that. So thank you. Our website is andersonsbookshop.com. We're all on social media, lots of other things going on, including just finding another great read as soon as you're done with this one. A couple of other upcoming events I just want to mention. We do have tickets on sale now for Beatrice Williams, if you like historical fiction, Mitch Albom, Neil Stevenson, and Dory Greenspan, among many others. So go ahead and check that out for your next adventure. And just an accessibility note, I'm going to go ahead and enable the live transcript at the bottom of the screen. This is something that you can control yourself. If it's something that you'd like to have, it's there. If not, you can actually go ahead and turn that off on your own screen as well. But we want to let folks know that it's there if you would like it. And on to this evening, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Madhulika Sikka, who is the former executive producer at NPR News and is now the current executive editor at Crown Publishing. So as we were saying earlier, finding good stories in all ways. We appreciate you joining us, Madhulika.
Thank you.
And of course, our book this evening, The State of Terror, we are delighted and honored to be celebrating this new book from Hillary Rodham Clinton and Louise Penny. Hillary Rodham Clinton, of course, is the first woman in U.S. history to become the presidential nominee of a major political party. She served as the 67th Secretary of State after nearly 4 decades in public service, advocating on behalf of children and families as an attorney, First Lady, and U.S. Senator. She is a wife, mother, grandmother, and author of 7 previous books, all published by Simon & Schuster. And Louise Penny, who Anderson's has been fortunate to welcome in the past as well, is an international award-winning and best-selling author whose books have hit #1 on multiple lists, the New York Times list, USA Today, and Globe and Mail. Her Chief Inspector Armand Gamache novels, published by Minotaur Books, have been translated into 31 languages. In 2017, she received the Order of Canada for her contributions to Canadian culture, and she lives outside of Montreal. Welcome this evening to all 3 of you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you for hosting us.
Oh my gosh, absolutely, anytime. You're all in for a fantastic conversation tonight, so I'm going to let you guys go ahead at it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Ginny.
Thanks, Ginny. Secretary Clinton, Louise, it's lovely to see you both. We are going to jump right into this very exciting book, which I had a great time reading. And I just wanted to start by laying out some of the themes covered in this propulsive new novel. By no means an exhaustive list, but here we go. Global terrorism, domestic terrorism, political intrigue among the president's own appointees, espionage at the highest levels of US government, a female Secretary of State appointed by a president who she opposed during the campaign, an imminent nuclear threat, nation-state allies who end up being frenemies more than friends, a US withdrawal from Afghanistan, and a former president who has left the institutions of the US government in tatters and also left the world wondering whether the US can be relied upon. That is a long list and by no means exhaustive. In other words, it's a heart-pounding, page-turning political thriller brought to you by 2 wonderful women. So the standard, what you would expect in a political thriller are all the things I listed. But the themes that struck with me were, this book has something that many predecessors do not, which is the heroes, or should I say the sheroes of this book are most definitely women of a certain age. And frankly, women in general. It highlights the power of female friendship, a woman's way of thinking about and looking at the world, as well as providing a cautionary tale for those who underestimate said women. So, how did that come about? Secretary Clinton, why don't we start with you?
Well, it came about because Louise and I were lucky enough to become friends because of another friend and someone who I grew up with in the suburbs of Chicago, my best friend since 6th grade, Betsy Johnson Ebeling, who gave an interview during the 2016 campaign about things that she and I liked to do together. And one that she mentioned was how we like to read and discuss books, which we have been doing since, we were children, really. And the reporter followed up by asking, well, so what are you reading now? And it's really serendipitous and quite fortunate that we happen to be reading the latest Gamache. So Betsy said, okay, we were reading Louise Penny. And then Louise's publisher reached out to Betsy. And if I'm not mistaken, Louise, you actually met Betsy at an event at Anderson's. So this whole story comes full circle. So why don't you take it from there?
It's exactly right. It was 5 years ago in 2016 that I met Betsy. The publisher asked, would you like to meet her? Because Secretary Clinton reads your books. And when I regained consciousness, I said, yes, please, I would love to. And so, yes, it was at an event, and many people watching right now and listening may have been at that event. It was hosted by Charlie Finch and another author. And I remember walking into, and I meet tons of people, as we all do. I remember walking into the auditorium, the back room, the green room, and there was Betsy. And Betsy turned around and she just entered my heart. As you've said many times, Hillary, it's so true. She had a real gift for friendship. And that's something that the two of you share. And inclusion. She never felt like there's only enough love to go around. I think she always felt, someone brings more love rather than taking from the pot. They add to the pot. And she and I became great, just connected and bonded immediately. And then 2 weeks after the end of my tour, my husband, Michael, passed away. He had had dementia for a number of years, and he passed away, which was, of course, he was the love of my life. I thought I would die for a while. And I was reading the notes of condolence, and you wrote one, Hillary. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I opened it up and it was lovely. It wasn't just a dear occupant, sorry for your loss, and then, the name stamped in. This really went into detail about Michael's life as a physician, as a pediatric oncologist, as a lead investigator for pediatric oncology, and talked about loss and grief. And you were at the end of a bruising political campaign. Don't have to tell you that. And you took time out to write to a woman you've never met, about a man you've never met, and a Canadian who can't even vote. This was selfless. There was no upside for you except just kindness. And I loved you from that moment on, and I always respected you, but I loved you from that moment on. And then we met, when was it, February of the following year?
2017. Again, thanks to Betsy, because
Right.
she's the one who called. Well, she's the one who called to tell me about your husband dying. She's the one who called to tell me that you would be in New York and could we figure out a way to get together. So really, we were friends before we were collaborators,
Right.
and
Right.
we had just an extraordinary opportunity to spend time together and with Betsy before she passed away from breast cancer in July of 2019. And some months after that, my agent called me, Louise's called her, and asked if we would consider doing a political thriller together. And I have to admit, I was very apprehensive, thinking that, I've never written a novel. I don't think this would be, easy to do. I also didn't want to undertake something that might undermine our friendship. I think Louise felt the
Right.
same way. But eventually, after talking it through and making the decision, really making the leap of faith into a serious conversation about, okay, if we were to do it, what would we want to write? We figured out we could actually work with each other.
Right.
Right.
I mean, sorry, go ahead,
No,
Louise.
go on, Madhulika, go on.
Well, I mean, I think it's so fascinating that, this idea was cooked up. Well, on one level, Secretary of State, career public servant, written nonfiction novels, and then this wonderful mystery novel writer. How do we get those two together? Clearly inspired. I had to ask you, Secretary Clinton, just because I have a husband with whom I'm not super competitive, but I will say, was there anything, I know there's someone in your house that has had a go at political thrillers. Was there a little bit of anything you can do, I can do better? That was part of this?
Well, I have to say, Madhulika, that actually, because Bill had collaborated with James Patterson, and because I have the same agent that Bill does, who also represents James Patterson, there was a model that had worked rather spectacularly well when they got together to write first, The President is Missing, and then later, The President's Daughter. So I knew it was possible. I just, had to be a little bit cautious because I wasn't, positive that it would work for Louise and me. And we did not show anyone our manuscript. We began working shortly before the pandemic, which meant, of course, that we had to do everything virtually, which was
Right.
the only disappointment about our collaboration because we had.
Oh God, do you remember we were trying to figure out how to get to, we thought, because we all thought that the pandemic, how long is it going to last? We'll go to a spa.
Didn't we all
Right.
think that way?
Yeah, we thought we'd find some resort somewhere and put our feet up, have pedicures while we
I
write.
thought, man, certainly it'll be over by the summer of 2020, and then we can get together. And, anyway, we did end up working virtually, but we didn't show the manuscript to anyone until we were finished with it. And it's only then that I showed it to Bill. And much to my delight, he really liked it. And even.
But he did have one comment, didn't he?
Yeah, he did make one comment, right, Louise?
Right near the end, he said the president wouldn't actually ever say that, and I was just like on the verge of arguing with the man before reason clicked in, and I realized who he is.
Well, I'm really fascinated by your writing this together and how that took place, and I want to talk a little bit more about it. But I have to tell you, as soon as I finished the book, I closed it and I turned to my husband and I was like, boy, they really had fun writing this. And I know that must seem weird given the litany of things that I laid out that you dealt with. But was it fun? Because it read to me like almost, okay, let's see what we can do here. It's something we haven't done before. Let's give it a go and let's have fun while we're doing it. Am I off base?
100% right. I mean, we had so much fun writing it, and I felt liberated. My other books are nonfiction, and you fact check them to within an inch of their lives. And I was so excited to work with Louise because I love her writing and I love her character development. And obviously, I'm a huge Gamache fan and have read every single book. But having someone to bounce ideas off of, and frankly, this book goes into a lot of different potential, challenges, threats. It also is a behind the scenes look at what happens in the Situation Room, what high stakes diplomacy is all about. So it really turned out to be fun. I mean, obviously not every minute of every day, because, you know, it's a lot of hard work, and we would FaceTime each other, and we often found that we were FaceTiming each other at 7 o'clock at night, and we were both in bed. We were so exhausted.
Well, that is not the photo that you did share on social, Secretary Clinton, because I did see one photo that you posted.
No, that's true. That's true. But it was such a relief, because I knew I was in bed and I thought, oh, this is going to be humiliating. But we know each other well enough. And sure enough, Hillary pops up and she's in bed too.
Oh, that is so funny. I've interviewed Louise enough to know that I know she hates spoilers. But what you just said about how you were both in bed talking about what you were doing, there is a character who is Canadian, who is taking part in a late night meeting and is wearing like moose print pajamas.
Yeah.
Did you
And
make
that
that
is
up completely?
That is based on a real time experience, because when we did FaceTime, we FaceTimed numerous times, but in this one moment where we both ended up actually being in bed while we're FaceTiming about, you know, the manuscript, I realized she has on a pair of flannel pajamas, very Canadian, but even more Canadian, they are covered with moose, and whatever the plural of mooses is, I have forgotten, but yes,
Moose.
so we did have a good laugh about her
Oh my God.
moose pajamas, and then they did end up in the book.
And who mocked me then and continues to mock me about?
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine.
Well, and then Hillary came over for lunch. I finally got my own bag. She came over for lunch about 10 days ago or so. And I presented her with her own pair of moose-covered flannel pajamas.
I feel very Canadian. Thank you
I
very
dare
much.
you to wear them on the next Zoom. I dare you. I'll give you $5.
Well, the real dare is to post it on social. But Louise, I'm really curious, in working with Secretary Clinton, how much did you sort of pepper her with, you know, pulling out of her the things that we all kind of want to know about these behind the scenes, you know, sort of, you know, intelligence briefings and conversations with your peer group around the world? Like, how much were you like, I want to know more about this, and what does this look like, and what was the mood, and how did it look?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there was a certain amount of peppering her with questions, but Hillary, you were very also, you know, you obviously knew what this was about, so she volunteered a lot of. We would just talk, and I would take notes, and you know, what a great opportunity. What a shame not to mine Secretary Clinton's experiences. 4 years. How many countries were you in, Hillary?
I went to 112 in the 4 years I was secretary.
And so it's not simply this is, you know, what the Situation Room looks like. This is what the cubby holes look like outside the Oval. You know, this is what all this looks like, which is vital, because you need the telling detail. You need that sense of place that adds that the sense of reality to it. But even more so was how it felt. That's what we really wanted to get at, is that, you know, anyone can write, I think, a propulsive thriller all about action. But we knew early on that we wanted this also to be about feelings, about relationships, but also how does it feel to be in a crisis, in the middle of a crisis, and information is coming at Secretary, in this case, Secretary Adams, from a million different directions. And she's in a meeting with people who may or may not be allies, may not be trustworthy. And that's where, Hillary, your experience and your input was obviously invaluable. And that's one thing this book has that no other book can.
And I think that,
go ahead, Madhulika.
well, I was saying that woman's perspective, I'm just so struck by it, because I do believe that women see the world differently. And I think that you saw the world differently from male secretaries of state, and your interests have demonstrated that. And I was struck by the character, both the secretary and her friend, you know, having a friend who had not come up through politics, who had not come up through the party, that someone you needed to have who you could communicate with as a friend and who would understand what you were doing and would see the world in a way, maybe I'm projecting too much, that maybe a male colleague, and certainly the chief of staff for Secretary Adams, is sometimes a bit flummoxed by how you spoke. So I'm curious about that perspective. That's why I call them sort of sheroes, you know, and women who frankly are underestimated in what is still very much a man's world, which is national security.
Well, you make 2 points there that I think both Louise and I would love to respond to. I mean, the first is um, we did want to write about friendship. We wanted to write about um, women supporting each other, women who could rely on each other during good times and not so good times. And as I said earlier, we had this common friend that uh, we both, you know, just absolutely adored. And I had another friend, actually a woman named Ellen, as I write in the acknowledgments, who had been a member of Congress, who worked with me in the State Department. She actually left Congress to be the Undersecretary for Arms Control. And you know, I thought often how I wished I could have talked to her about the plot. She sadly also died prematurely in May of 2019 because she was an expert on nuclear arms. And so I knew who I would talk to, who I would rely on when really difficult things happened. There is a role, an actual position in the State Department. After there's one in the White House too, but in the State Department called counselor, that the secretary can fill however he or she chooses. And I actually chose for my counselor when I was in the State Department someone who I knew well and had worked with and totally trusted and relied on. So there was my experience and the experience of others whom I knew informing that decision that you really need somebody. I mean, as Louise just said, you often don't know who to trust. And that's on the inside of your government as well as on the outside. You're not sure what agendas are being pursued. So it's important to have at least one, hopefully more, in your circle who you can really trust to give you the information you need to tell you the truth and all that. So we wanted to have real characters, just like Louise does in Gamache. We wanted people to feel like they knew these characters, particularly the two protagonists, Ellen and Betsy, but the other characters as well. I mean, we spent time developing them. Who were they? Where were they from? What was their backstory? Were they good or were they bad? How were they going to interact with the plot and the other characters? So we spent a lot of time on character development because we, you know, I have a great love of political thrillers. I have read many of them over many years.
Thank you.
But I also knew that a lot of political thrillers, number one, don't feature women as the key protagonists.
Precisely.
If women are in the stories at all, they're often caricatures. You know, they might be, you know, wielding automatic rifles or kicking down doors or betraying somebody, but they're not at the real core of the story. We wanted to change that. And then we wanted to deal with this other question you raised, which is how easy it is for women to be underestimated. Any woman in any position in the public eye has likely experienced that. So we wanted to, you know, make it clear that our women were not superheroes. They were smart, dedicated, brave women, but they had insecurities and they had, you know, issues, and they were, you know, kind of women that everybody who reads about them can kind of relate to in some way. So yeah, the being misunderstood or being underestimated was something we were very well aware of when we went into the writing and the creating of the characters and the plotting.
That's right. We wanted, as you said, smart women who use their wits, their intelligence to solve a problem, and not hand grenades. I mean, not that there aren't a lot of explosions, but they're simply not the ones throwing the hand grenades.
Well, you have to have a good peppering of explosions, and goodness knows there are plenty.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
I mean, and what's interesting is in the way they conduct themselves, like it's interesting, you write about how Secretary Adams, she's not caught up in what I might describe as the macho-ness of performativeness. Like if she has to be the one to take a step forward to shake the hand of someone rather than that person coming to her, she's not gonna, she's gonna be like, okay, fine, I need to get the work done. This is what I'm
not going to allow her ego to get in the way of national security.
Exactly. And I think that those are the things that I took away also as a woman of a certain age, that I sort of, this might sound a little melodramatic, but it's felt seen, that, okay, you know what? There are some differences, and maybe those differences are useful and effective in a way.
Well, we did. You're right. I mean, there were many scenes actually, or a number of them, where Ellen and Betsy, the two main characters, like the three of us, like any woman probably watching who has been underestimated, and most of us have at some stage in our life, sometimes chronically, you learn how to use that to your advantage. Not necessarily to manipulate, but to understand that this is the reality, and this is how I am not going to allow myself to be defined by someone else. This is how I'm going to navigate that situation, which is simply a reality.
Right.
And you see several examples. There's one where Betsy uses that. She's trying to get information, but she pretends to be just a woman of a certain age playing Candy Crush.
Right. And this idea that, women, when they reach a certain age, are invisibilized by society, and that almost she uses it to her advantage because people are not going to pay attention to her. But, we still care about how we are perceived. And you went there in the first few pages. Secretary Adams comes.
I think we both love we love the whole thing, but the first few pages.
The first few pages, Louise, you will allow me to at least declare, because readers who haven't read it yet, will find this out in the first 4 pages. Secretary Adams comes back from a very grueling trip where she hasn't really slept, and she has to head straight to the Capitol, and she's not, shall we say, looking her best. And she's come all the way from Korea. And I thought it was a very interesting choice to just deal with it head on. And I thought, we're gonna get some real life experiences coming through in this pages of a novel. And I applaud you for taking that.
Well, there was also a nice little Easter egg in there where she's walking into the not State of the Union address at the Capitol, and as she walks by, some of the other members of Congress and senators are mumbling. The men are mumbling, "Dirty woman, dirty woman," which we love.
It's just, and Secretary Clinton, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Something you probably dealt with. I was really intrigued by your choice to just deal with it head on at the beginning.
Well, you're right. I mean, I dealt with it. I think most women in any of these high profile public positions deals with it. I told Louise a story about, flying madly around and landing in a country overnight, early in the morning, heading to meet with the prime minister and his government officials. No time for a hairdresser, for heaven's sakes. It's just you're on the go. And so I pulled my hair back. I thought it looked fine. I didn't mind at all. But when I got there and I'm sitting on the opposite side of the table from him, he literally is staring at me, saying nothing. And this goes on for an uncomfortable, maybe 2 minutes. I mean, that's an eternity. And finally I said, Mr. Prime Minister, is there something wrong? Is there a problem that you'd like to, get out on the table, so to speak, before we start? And he looks at me and goes, I was told that if your hair is pulled back, that means you're in a bad mood. I said, no, it's a bad hair day, Prime Minister, not a bad mood. I can guarantee you that. I'm very happy to be here.
But it's true too. You would come back from some incredibly important conference or meeting or negotiation, and the press would be talking about your hair, or they'd be talking about what you're wearing, or your shoes, or what have you. And I, as a woman watching that, I remember just like my hair was on fire. I was
Well, but that, the double standard is alive and well, and
Right.
we were not going to ignore it. We were going to, as you say, just walk right into it,
Right.
because it does create an aura or an air of familiarity for the reader immediately off the bat. Yes, is this going to be a high stakes political thriller, high stakes diplomacy, terrorism, explosions? Yes, it is. But it's also going to be rooted in the reality of, the women who we center in this novel, their lives, their backgrounds. They are fictional characters, but they have characteristics of people that Louise and I, knew and admired, as do so many of the other characters in the book.
Well,
it also sets up very, very nicely the immediately the relationship between Betsy and Ellen, and also sets a tone, because we also wanted to telegraph to people that there is also going to be a certain playfulness, that there is humor in this book as well.
Right, and hence
as Louise likes to say, name another book, let alone a political thriller, where you will find both moose pajamas and Spanx.
Spanx. I was going to say I have Spanx in my notes. Spanx and Chardonnay pretty early on in the book.
Are you saying that that's not a trope for political thrillers?
I think we started
in Bill's.
I don't think it was before, Louise. I really don't.
I think there's a trend now.
There's a trend.
See. But those wonderful sort of human touches aside, you deal with some scary stuff in this book. And it is not an exaggeration to say it's ripped from the headlines. I'm sorry to use that cliche, but it is. And that to me, it brings me to asking you both the question of the process of all the things that you could write about. And goodness knows there are so many. How you decided, at least in this book, I will get to the sequel question later. You took this one on because I mentioned, withdrawal from Afghanistan, even though it's a global terrorism, domestic terrorism is part of it. A rogue nuclear physicist in Pakistan, actually, the real one just died recently. It could not be more timely. And I'm just wondering about the process of deciding, okay, this is the one where we will have this thread that we think is going to be the one that will tell us this propulsive narrative, and how you decided on it. And
well, Louise asked the question that led us to the core of the plot, so I'll let her start.
Well, what happened was, you see, as Hillary, as we started off our conversation tonight, saying we had no idea whether we could do it. God knows our publishers didn't know whether we could do it or not. So what they asked us to do, which I was sort of a little reluctant to do because I'd never really had to do it. Hillary, you have, and that's write an outline. You prove to us that you know where you're going. And I think I was just feeling a little lazy. As it turns out, it was a wonderful exercise, and I think made all the difference in the world. So Hillary and I, first of all, before we even put a word down, we had to figure out what the book is about. So we spent a few weeks FaceTiming each other and saying, what about this? And what about the alien invasion? No, that won't work. And suppose the president is missing, and no, that won't work. So we've sort of built
such a tired trope. The president is missing.
Exactly. What about the president's daughter? No. But we were going nowhere, right? We kept hitting dead ends. We had ideas, but we couldn't see how they would be developed. And at one stage, we thought both of our screens had frozen because we were just staring at each other, not moving. We had no more ideas. Then finally, I asked the question I should have asked weeks earlier, and that was, Hillary, when you were Secretary of State, what woke you up at 2 a.m? What was your nightmare?
Yeah. And I proceeded to give Louise nightmares, talking about all the things that kept me up at night. But one that kept me up then, can keep me up even now, although I'm not in government anymore, is whether terrorists get their hands on a nuclear weapon, whether it's a dirty bomb or something more sophisticated. and I'm not revealing any state secrets. This is in the public domain. You can actually Google it, but we know that this has been a constant search on the on behalf of terrorists, particularly Al Qaeda, but others as well. Um, we know that on the deep, deep, deep black market, the deep, deep, deep dark web, there are people who are looking for, maybe trying to sell or buy some kind of nuclear material, some of it from hospital waste that, if accumulated in large enough uh, amounts, could be dangerous. Some of it through break-ins or um, inside jobs. I mean, we know that this has gone on and continues to go on. So I told Louise about how when I was a senator, I was briefed one time, again, this is now all public, about how a nuclear device of some sort could literally fit into a suitcase, left on a street corner, left, in a train station, left somewhere. And as we talked, we thought, that would be the kind of nightmare scenario that was rooted in reality,
Hmm.
hopefully never ever becomes real, and that it would give us, the sense of urgency that we were seeking in the plot that we were developing.
It was terrifying. And then you walked, because we had to figure out, anyone can have a good idea, and that was a good idea, clearly. But then how do we realize it? And then you walked me through, because at that stage, this was before the election. This was, before January 6th. But Trump had already had the deal with Afghanistan for the withdrawal. So you sort of walked me through what we could do with that, how this could come about, that the withdrawal without a plan, that the Taliban, you saw it, would stream back in. With them would come Al Qaeda, and with them would come the possibility of another attack against the US, perhaps even nuclear. And it was terrifying. And that's when we decided we would write. That's what we would write.
Well, as someone who lives in Washington, D.C., I am acutely aware of that scariness. At one point, I used to think about, how far would the fallout go and how far I live from the White House or the Capitol. But, the nuclear threat and overseas terrorism is something that, one expects in a lot of political thrillers. But I think what was also interesting was how you looked at the challenges the U.S. is facing domestically. And I'm really curious as to why you decided to include that too, and why you felt it was important.
Well, this book is, among all the other things that you have referenced about it, a cautionary tale. You know, as Louise just said, we were writing it. We certainly conceived it, and we were writing it before the election. We didn't know who was going to win. Certainly before the insurrection on January 6th, but I had seen, and Louise had, of course, observed, not as an American, but as a Canadian following us, the efforts to divide us, the efforts to undermine our institutions, to, really diminish the rule of law, to turn the idea of patriotism literally on its head, that people who would invade our capital would somehow be the true patriots, that people who would refuse vaccines would somehow view that as a sign of political courage instead of just tragic, misinformation. And so when we were pulling all the pieces together for the plot, we did talk about how the United States is beset by enemies from without, but also enemies from within. And the rise of nationalism, the rise of an authoritarian mindset, which is not just among, supporters of the Republican Party and the former president, but it can be found in many democracies now across the world. So this was an important plot line because it is also, as you said, ripped from the headlines. This is going on right now. The effort to promote the big lie, to undermine our faith in each other and our institutions, to try to convince people that the president who is in the White House shouldn't be there against all evidence and every fact to the contrary.
Mm.
And I do worry greatly about the support that these extremists, these domestic terrorists have gotten from people in the Republican Party, people in elected office, people who are helping to fund these movements. And they are intent upon turning the clock back on
Mhm.
our democracy, to further an agenda and a vision of America that is very, in my view, dark, exclusive, limiting, but which they define as, quote, the true America. So this was happening also in real time, and we decided that we would include it as part of the plot in the novel.
Right. We needed to. We talked about was it the Askada? I've forgotten how the name of this sort of this demon that is described in mythology. The Askada. Anyway, can't remember. Who's built on lies? Who's created out of lies? And we also talk about the vast silence. And what lives in the vast silence. And I think that was also part of the warning here, is that this is a call to action, to speak out. And Hillary Clinton has spoken out for years about the vast right-wing conspiracy and got laughed at. She's warned everyone about Trump. She's warned everybody about Afghanistan. Not that it was necessarily a mistake to get out, but you need to have a firm plan if possible. And we've just lost a Colin Powell, who did have also the courage to speak up against, what was at the time his own party, and to leave the party and to vote for Hillary in 2016.
And I think what's important that comes across is that foreign and domestic are intertwined when we look at these ideologies, and there is more of a connection, that something over there has nothing to do with us over here, but they're all connected. I have lots more things to ask you, but I do want to give a chance to the people who sent in some of their questions. So I'm going to ask you a few of those, and maybe we'll come back to more of mine. And there's one question which is for both of you, for Secretary Clinton, the process of writing fiction versus nonfiction, how that felt for you. And for Louise, writing a political thriller versus the kind of sort of psychological, character-driven, and a group of characters we have come to know over years, how that process was for you. So Secretary Clinton, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I found the process liberating. I really did. I've written, 7 nonfiction books, and I always had a clear idea of the argument I wanted to make or the stories that I wanted to tell. But I also was very conscious of the fact that, it had to actually be the real facts that I was, conveying to the readers. And I have found, especially working with someone as skilled as Louise is, how impactful it can be to talk about something I care deeply about, namely the threats to democracy, the real problems with terrorists trying to get nuclear weapons, and things that I really, really want people to understand and know we have to deal with. How impactful it is to do it in the form of fiction. When you write nonfiction, whether it's a book or an article, or you even give a speech about something that you care about, and you're basically sort of giving people spinach. I mean, let me tell you how important it is that you eat this spinach so you can grow up and be strong. Let me tell you how important it is that you pay attention to the fact that we have domestic terrorists threatening our country. But when you bring people into a story,
Mm.
and of course you've created the story, you've created the characters who are going to be the vehicles for telling the story. I found that so exciting and different from anything I've done, and I hope will have, certainly the kind of impact that Louise and I are being told that it's having, that people are really enjoying it, that they're finding it a great read, but they're also going, wow, yeah, those two are connected, or I hadn't thought about that before. That's music to my ears.
And I loved writing with Hillary. I mean, it was just, I mean, it's fascinating. What a mind and what experience. And what was surprising was how great you were too at creating characters, at the depth, at profundity, how not just the plots, but the subplots and all those the grace notes that really make up a good novel. And it was a challenge for sure to move away from what I normally write, to write the political thriller. But when you're writing with Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State, the party nominee, you made it easy. And this the same sort of, it's storytelling. It's storytelling, and it's the same sort of thing that the people around fires hundreds of thousands of years ago would do. And that's all we did as well, was we just had a good story to tell. And as Hillary said, we didn't want it to be a bitter pill. We wanted it to be fun and entertaining and propulsive. And how best to get a point across than to make it easy on people to be able to approach it.
So there wasn't a sense of, by taking on a new genre for both of you, there wasn't a moment where it was like, oh, seemed like a great idea.
Well, I mean, I think there were a few moments of doubt. And that's why we could write these characters who had doubt as well. And is this such a good idea? Uh-oh, what have we done? Now we have to, as you see the deadline approaching and the agents are asking, how's it going? Oh dear. And we would kid them. I remember kidding with both of them, saying, oh, Hillary, shouldn't we start? This is like 2 weeks before the deadline.
Heart attack.
But it was, the thing is that Hillary and I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I will. We didn't have to do this. We chose to try to do it because we thought it would be fun to work together. We wanted it to be a challenge. We wanted it to be out of our comfort zone, and just really embrace it and go for it and not play safe.
Right.
And I think that's really why it is what it is, that it is different.
Secretary Clinton, you talked about the sort of liberation of writing fiction, but someone wants to know whether there were things that you started thinking about including that you realized, oh, I can't include that because of issues of confidentiality or secrecy, or, I know nonfiction books often get vetted. I don't know.
That's when I would hold the Chardonnay bottle just, beyond her reach and say, tell me.
But whether there were circumstances where you thought, oh, whoops, can't do that, can't say that.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and I was very, very careful. As I said, much of what we began to think about, was in the public domain in one form or another, not maybe the specifics that I had been privy to before, but certainly the outlines, sufficient to get, to get the plot going. So yeah, you do have to, you do have to remind yourself, okay, wait a minute, I got to make sure that's in the public domain. I've got to make sure that's been reported, written on, declassified. But we were able to do that.
Well, the other thing you did too is that you did have it fact checked, just
Sure.
to be absolutely sure that your memory, lined up with what actually happened.
But you mean you actually live in a fact-based world?
Yeah, we do. I mean, that's what's so great about this story. Even though it's fictional, it is based in the fact-based world.
Well, and Hillary and I talk about this. Had we actually given this proposal or handed this book in 6 years ago, the publishers would never have bought it, or they'd never have agreed. They would have said, that's ridiculous. No one would believe it. Now everyone's trying to figure out how much of it is fact.
Right. Sadly, that's a horrible reflection on the world we're in now. I love this this question because it's about collaboration. And it's, as a high school government teacher, I'm constantly trying to teach my students how to collaborate with their peers so they can solve problems in class and in our society. You both collaborated on this masterpiece and brought such different perspectives and experiences to the table. How did you make this collaboration work? And what advice do you have for teenagers to work as part of a team?
Well, I want to go back and reiterate something that Louise said. And that is, we really worked hard on an outline. I know that sounds simplistic, but I could remember back when I was in high school, and thank you, questioner, for being a high school government teacher. I was so influenced by my high school government teachers. I remember having teachers who said, the outline is your friend. It may be really difficult. You may find it kind of, boring that you have to write all of this down. But by doing that, you will actually get better and learn more about what you want to say. And I think that's true in any kind of collaboration. I mean, first you have to define what it is you're going to collaborate about. We were trying to define what is the book we would write if we could write a book together. And it was only through what turned out to be a pretty long process to create a 19-page outline that we could say, oh my gosh, this actually, might be the basis for our book. And the outline gave us the chance to collaborate by saying, well, what about this? Or no, I'm not sure that would work. Or what about adding this? Or what do you think? So it was through forcing ourselves to the discipline of an outline that we actually learned how to collaborate on this project together.
Right. It was really, and you are a master at this, Hillary, of the active listening, of listening very closely to each other, of respecting what the other person has to say, even if we don't, and we didn't always agree. But I think what we did try to do was find that 5% or 10% or 40% in what the other person had just said that we can build on, and to understand that we are in a safe place, that I could say something, let's have the heroin made out of wax. And we're like, nah, I don't think that would work very well, but maybe it should be a heroin. And so, it's obviously being ridiculous, but we understood that we could say things that really were outlandish and not be dismissed or mocked or laughed at or shut down, that the other person would always respect us, if not actually the idea. And I think that was huge. That allowed us then to be courageous.
Yes.
To be brave, to be audacious, to take chances because we knew that we were in a safe place. And I think that's the sort of thing that I don't want to be divisive about this and say women do this and men do this, because there's a lot of overlap, but I think women do tend to be quite good at trying to find that common ground and working together. And it's very important to respect each other, even if we don't agree.
Well, I think that what you're speaking to is you're coming to the table, both sides, with the best of intentions. And if you start off that way, sadly, it's something that I think is lost in our sort of political landscape right now. But
it was fun. We had a great deal of fun, and that was important.
Well, this question, which I think will make the last question, I want to be conscious of time. And Louise, I know how you feel about some things. I did not come up with this question, though I thought it. For Louise, since you've been immersed in Three Pines for so many years and for so many books, how did you keep the world of Three Pines out of this story? Did you ever find yourself starting to bring in a character from Three Pines in? And if so, which character? So bearing in mind, lots of people have not read this book yet.
Right.
And the secretary's lips are Pass.
What I will say is that, as Hilary talked about before, I mean, just the 17th book in the Gamache series, The Madness of Crowds, has just come out in the end of August. So that's 17 years, 20 years of being immersed in that world. And that world is one that has been defined by a couple of lines from Auden, which is really the leitmotif through the whole series. And that's his elegy or his poem to Melville. And he wrote that goodness existed. That was the new knowledge. His terror had to blow itself quite out to let him see it. So the Gamache books are about terror, but they're also about goodness. And that, in that sense, it was easy to bring the Gamache books and all the themes and the tone to this book as well. This book is about terror. Absolutely, the external threats, the internal domestic threats, but also the terror that we carry around inside ourselves, that maybe we won't be good enough. The terror that Secretary Adams carries, that maybe she's going to make a mistake, that the president carries. So it's about terror, but it's also about goodness. And in that sense, it was not a huge challenge to make that transition, that level of the themes.
Secretary Clinton, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, because I know you're such a fan of the Three Pines books, as probably everybody on this Zoom is.
Well, I mean, Louise said that so well. And in the acknowledgements, just to slightly add on to what Louise just said, she makes this point that, yes, it's a book about terror, but it's also a book about love and courage. And those are two other virtues, two attributes, two feelings that certainly shape the sensibility of the Gamache series. And so that is at the core of, kind of Louise's belief system about the way the world should operate. And I share that. So yes, it is a book about love and courage and friendship. In addition to all the terror and things being blown up, those are the more lasting aspects of what happens and who our characters are, just as that is in the Gamache series with the characters and the plots there.
I do want to say too that if I could just throw in that I encourage people to read the acknowledgements, not necessarily mine, but Hilary's acknowledgements are probably the most beautiful writing I have ever read. It's absolutely beautiful, and the way you end it, which is absolutely the perfect coda to the book, and that is that let's all pray that I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but let's all pray that the fiction does not become fact, and do our best, because it's on us. It's on all of us.
Well, it's a rollicking good read. So I have to end with asking you both. Here it is. When am I going to read the sequel?
We're just having too much fun talking about this one. This was such a labor of love. We're really proud of this book, and not looking too much further beyond where we are right now.
No, exactly. We just, on my agenda, I've written, I don't know if you realize this, Hilary, but on every day of our tour, including today, I've written enjoy, love every moment. Enjoy, love every moment, because it's easy to lose track of that. And I'm having a blast.
Well, I have enjoyed and loved every moment of this. I hope the crowd has too. It's been such a privilege to talk to you both, and I will be ready and available when/if there is a sequel to continue the discussion.
Hilary, don't you think if we do have a sequel, we have to have a character named Madhulika Sikka? Don't you think that's like the best name ever?
Yeah, Louise, write it down.
Okay, I am giving you permission to use my name.
You all heard it here first, right? Anderson's was the apparently we got you two together to write this book. So if there is a sequel, our event will have inspired the name of your character.
Anderson's is hallowed ground as far as Hilary and I are concerned.
Well, whatever your next projects are, I hope that we can visit you. You can visit us rather for them, hopefully in person if we can all stay safe and get to that point, right? Well, I'd like to thank all three of you and everyone watching for being with us tonight. This has been just a delightful conversation. It is it's very evident when you can see an author speaking about something that they care about and that their passion is in the work that they have produced. But to see the conversation when it has been a collaboration this way is truly a joy. So thank you both for sharing that with us. And thank you, Madhulika, for moderating that.
Madhulika, you were marvelous. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
indeed.
Secretary, and lovely to see you again, Louise.
Yes, I do want to let everyone know that watching that your books, will send you an email when those books are ready. They are signed, thanks to the generosity of the Secretary and Louise Penny. So thank you all for joining us, everybody. We stay safe and happy reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, everyone. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.